meditate upon the Lord, and you will attain peace. This line emphasizes the importance of constantly remembering and meditating on God's name. Now, through repeating remembrance, one can attain inner peace and spiritual fulfillment. These lines are a beautiful reflection of the core teaching of Sikhism. With the pride of having a galaxy of empowered people today in Orange City, I am Sarbpreet Singh, delighted and privileged to welcome you all to the 6th edition of Orange City Literature Festival organized by SDR Knowledge Foundation, powered by Raisoni Education. Today, we gather to explore the essence of Sikh history, and there is no better guide to this journey than Mr. Sarbpreet Singh. His retelling of Sikh stories reflect not just historical events but also the deep spiritual truth that underlines them. Through his words, we are reminded of the true teaching that have shaped the Sikh community. Today, we have Mr. Sarbpreet Singh along with us. A huge round of applause for Sir. He is a playwright, writer, and a podcaster known for his work in literature, history, and theatre. His books including Kultar Mines, The Camel Merchant, and Philadelphia, The Night of Resilient Spirits, The Story of Sikhs, and The Sufi Nightingale. His latest title, Sword and Victory, explored Sikh history in 18th century. His story of Sikh podcast reaches listeners in 90 countries, bringing Sikh heritage to contemporary audience. Singh has performed multi-hats playing, including Kultar Mines, and has recently adapted Sufi Nightingale for the stage. As a musician and a composer, he brings Punjabi poetry to life, sharing work by poets like Sheikh Farid and Bulle Shah. We also have Dr. Harshali Singh as the moderator for this session. Let's give a huge round of applause for ma'am. We welcome you, ma'am. Ma'am, Dr. Harshali Singh is a member judge at the District Commercial Dispute Redressal Commission and an award-winning author, poet, academician, and accommodating therapist. A painter, she has received prestigious awards such as Munshi Premchand Literature Award 2023 and the Ashoka Award 2023. As a founder member of House of Harmony, she has contributed significantly to literature and women-centric issues through her books and anthologies. Her most recent work, Anarkali, The Queen, explored the complex history figure of Anarkali. Dr. Singh is also known for her involvement in literature, literacy, festival, and panel discussion. Now, with further ado, as the topic itself is very captivating and we are going to dive into it, it is a request from my side that please structure it to a 40 minutes time span. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we would further ado, I would like to call them on the stage. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. So nice to see the hall full, almost. And I look forward to talking to all of you about a religion that I married into, but more about that later. First, let me start by asking a question to all of you. Now listen to the question very, very carefully because I'm sure a few of you can answer this. Do you know what the word Sikh means? Anybody? Yes. So the word Sikh actually means a disciple, a learner, or a student. And it all began with Guru Nanak Dev Ji. The youngest religion, Sikhism, is a beacon of equality, of religious freedom, of justice. And as I said, it all began with Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Sir, I'll begin this question with you now. that what do you think, or how do you think Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teachings really affected the creation of the Sikh faith?
Hello. Wonderful. I can still hear a few people speaking in the back. Be warned that if you keep speaking, you'll have to join us on stage. Sorry, I thought you were going to say something. You're the judge, but I'm the one lecturing them. So I'm going to start by making a somewhat extravagant statement. The question was, how do Guru Nanak Sahib's teachings inform the Sikh religion? I will simply say that every idea in Sikhism, every idea without exception, can be traced all the way back to Guru Nanak Sahib. And I will elaborate on this as we get the conversation further. Guru Nanak Sahib was someone whose personality had many, many facets. Some facets of his personality, all of us, anyone who lives in the Indian subcontinent and has even a passing understanding of the Sikh faith are quite familiar with. Compassion, a commitment to equality, a commitment to social justice, a commitment to fighting superstition. These are all things that define Guru Nanak Sahib's philosophy and, in a certain sense, form the underpinnings of the Sikh faith. Now, what it might startle you to learn is there are some other aspects of the Sikh faith which normally would be associated with some of the other gurus, such as a commitment to fighting tyranny, a commitment to self-sacrifice. Even these ideas stem directly from Guru Nanak Sahib and his life. So, in summary, I would say that all aspects of the Sikh faith are absolutely derived from Guru Nanak Sahib's thought. So his influence on the faith is profound and fundamental.
That's very true. And to tell you a little bit about how I was introduced to the beauty of Sikhism is that as a Hindu married into a Sikh family, my first visit to Amritsar at the Golden Temple was with my in-laws. And while we were circumambulating the Sarovar, he spoke to me at length, my father-in-law and my mother-in-law both, and told me about the expanse of Sikhism. But before we go into that, there was a very interesting thing he told me about, my father-in-law, God rest his soul, about the 4 udasis that Guru Nanak Ji took. Now, udasis, just for context, is the spiritual journey that he took from 1500s to 1524. And these were 4 spiritual journeys that he took to different parts of the country. The first being towards the east, towards Bengal and Assam. The second being towards Sri Lanka. The third being towards, up north, towards Kashmir and Tibet and Ladakh. And the fourth one being towards the Arabian Peninsula, towards Makkah and Medina. So, sir, what I'd like to know is, what was the expanse and the impact of these travels that he did on the spread of Sikhism globally?
I'll be delighted to answer that question, but in order to create a little bit of context for the udasis, it would perhaps be useful to spend a little bit of time on Guru Nanak Sahib's life until that point when the udasis began. So Guru Nanak Sahib was born in Talwandi, which is now known as Nankana Sahib, and falls in Pakistan. I've had the good fortune of visiting Nankana Sahib a couple of times, in fact early this year when I was in Pakistan. Guru Nanak Sahib was born into a so-called high caste family. Why is this important? This is important because in order to set the context for Guru Nanak Sahib's thought and philosophy, it's useful to take stock of the situation at the time of Guru Nanak Sahib's birth. So the northern part of the country had been ruled mostly by Muslim rulers of Afghan descent for several hundred years. Taimur or Tamerlane's invasions were still fresh in the collective memory of the people in Punjab, and those were invasions that caused a tremendous amount of trauma. So the Muslims were more or less the ruling class. There were two dominant religions, Islam and Hinduism. Guru Nanak Sahib was born into a Hindu family. His family was from the Khatri caste, which is a so-called higher caste. So the origins of the caste system are shrouded. We really don't understand them very well today. The beginnings were probably very benign because a lot of societies, ancient societies, organized themselves by occupation. In Guru Nanak's time, however, caste had calcified into a very rigid instrument of oppression. The higher castes relentlessly oppressed the lower castes, and there were rules that dictated the relative worth of the castes. And guess in that pyramid where all women sat, regardless of which caste they were born into, right at the bottom. That was the situation in society at Guru Nanak Sahib's time. Okay, I'm going to ask everybody to please be quiet. So Guru Nanak Sahib was above all a revolutionary. His first revolution was against the injustice of caste. I'm not going to speak until there's silence in the hall. Thank you.
We'd like you to listen carefully because ये आपके लिए बहुत अच्छा है जानना जो एक religion आप यहाँ बैठे हो सुनने के लिए जिस religion के बारे में जिसमें आपके friends भी हैं और उनके बारे में जानना ज़रूरी है तो ज़रूर सुनिए आराम से and अपनी बातें थोड़ी देर बात कर लेना.
Thank you. So Guru Nanak Sahib turned around 9. He had always been a precocious child, very intelligent, very thoughtful, and he would often question everything. So you may or may not know this, the upper castes were considered Dvij, or twice born. Your first birth was your natural birth. Your second birth occurred when you were 9 or 10, with a ceremony where the higher castes were invested with a sacred thread, and your formal education would start. So it was young Nanak's day to be invested with the Janeu. The family Purohit, Pandit Hardayal, had been summoned. So new clothes had been acquired. There was a big feast that was going to happen. And Pandit Hardayal started chanting the various mantras that are chanted during such a ceremony. And as he was about to put the Janeu across the young Nanak's torso, this 9-year-old boy starts asking the Pandit a few questions. As you will see, these questions were quite rhetorical. He asked the Pandit, "Is this thread going to remain clean forever, or can it get dirty?" The Pandit very kindly says, "No, of course it's going to get dirty. It's just a thread." He says, "Is it unbreakable, or can it break?" The Pandit says, "Of course it can break. It's just a thread." And then he says, "Can it be burned by fire?" Now the Pandit starts getting a little irritated. He thinks this little boy is trying to act smart, maybe sass him. So, he says, "Be quiet and do what I'm telling you to do." And then Guru Nanak Sahib says, "Can my sister have one?" The Pandit is now really, really annoyed. And this 9-year-old boy refuses to wear the Janeu. That was Guru Nanak Sahib's first rebellion. Now, was he rebelling against the religious practice? No. What he was rebelling against was the fact that it was creating elites, and there were people in society who were excluded. That was not acceptable to him. There are many other stories about Guru Nanak Sahib as he grew up. His father was a senior revenue official. Of course, like parents in these days who want their children to be very successful, become doctors or engineers or startup company CEOs, Mehta Kalu, his father, also wanted him to be very successful. So he kept pressing his son, do this, do that, study, but Guru Nanak Sahib showed no interest. His only interest would be seeking out holy men, discoursing with them, talking about spiritual matters, much to the consternation of his father. So when he was much older, his father was very exasperated and said, you know what? You can't do anything else. Anyone can be a shopkeeper. I've decided that you're going to be a shopkeeper. So Guru Nanak, Nanak then was a very obedient young man. He said, of course, father, whatever you say. So he gave him 20 rupees and said, go to the nearby town, buy salt, chili, turmeric, things that people need, bring them back, open a shop, and sell them at a modest profit, and that will get you started on your livelihood. So, fully intending to do what his father said, the young Nanak sets out. He only travels a short distance and finds a group of sadhus in the forest. So, some of them are standing on one leg doing penances, others are sitting on deer skin, reading big tomes, some are in samadhi in the middle of the water, some are naked. So he's very curious, he sits down with them, he starts asking them questions. Are you cold? Are you hungry? The sadhus get a little irritated and then they answer his questions. And then he asks them, what do you eat? Don't you feel hungry? The sadhu said, of course we feel hungry. We're human beings. But we eat whatever people bring us. If people bring us food, we eat. If they don't bring us food, we don't eat. So Guru Nanak Sahib turns to his companion and says, my father said, aaj sacha sauda karke aao. And he says, isse sacha sauda kya ho sakta hai? These poor sadhus are hungry. Let's buy food and feed them. So he uses the 20 rupees to buy food and feeds them. And then when night falls, reality sets in, and he drags his feet home, doesn't dare to go to his house, sits outside the village, and sure enough, when his father finds out what he did, it is said that he even gets slapped. And then his sister protects her brother. So Guru Nanak Sahib fails utterly as a trader. Now let me ask you a question. A show of hands. How many of you have ever been to a Gurdwara? Some, quite a few. When you've gone to a Gurdwara, have you eaten in the langar? So, all over the world, even if people know nothing about Sikhism, they more or less know about the Guru Ka Langar.
That's true.
Which was the community kitchen that Guru Nanak Sahib set up. Out of the failure of Guru Nanak Sahib as a trader rose this great institution of langar, because that was the first time that langar was served to anyone. Why was the langar important? Guru Nanak Sahib was not the first holy man or woman who essentially declared that caste discrimination was bad, not acceptable. Bhagat Kabir expressed similar sentiments before him. Bhagat Namdev, who is from this state, expressed the same sentiments. By the way, both of their writings are in the Sikh scripture, the Sri Guru Granth Sahib. So, the difference was that while some of these other peers railed against the caste system, Guru Nanak Sahib actually did something practical. Now in those days, caste differences were mostly enforced through the eating of food. So if there was a feast, all castes were invited, but the Brahmins sat together and ate, the Khatris sat together and ate, and so on, for the so-called lower classes. In Guru Nanak Sahib's langar, everyone had to sit together and eat. it is said that when the Emperor Akbar visited the third Sikh Guru, Guru Amar Das at Goindwal, guess what the Emperor Akbar had to do before he was admitted to the Guru's presence? He had to go to the langar and eat. Because when you ate, not knowing the caste of the person on your left and on your right, you truly were committed to equality. So that was the genius of Guru Nanak Sahib, and I'm getting to your answer, more than halfway there. So Guru Nanak Sahib's spiritual ways continued for several years until finally he was sent to Sultanpur Lodi, where his sister and brother-in-law lived, and there he got employment at the Moti Khana, the imperial storehouse. And there it seemed that Guru Nanak had finally found the stability that his father wanted him to have. In the day he would be the storekeeper. At night, hymns would be sung in his house. In the morning, he would go to the nearby river to bathe. And it is said that one day, Guru Nanak didn't come back from his bath. Everybody thought he was dead. He emerged 3 days later. I'm speeding up the story. He emerged 3 days later, and it is said that his first pronouncement was, "There is no Hindu, there is no Musliman." And everybody got upset. What do you mean? There are Hindus, there are Muslims, they are different, they have different faiths. What he was saying was that fundamentally all human beings are the same. That was the point when he gave away all of his possessions, and with his dear friend Mardana, who was a Muslim musician who played an instrument called the rabab, Guru Nanak Sahib set out on his travels, and he traveled for more than 2 decades. The travels were hugely important because he visited many places, discoursed with many people, had fantastic experiences, debunked superstition, and in the process, without proselytizing, created a large community of followers all around the Indian subcontinent. So sorry for that long answer, but I wanted to provide some context.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Now we have a clear context of what we're talking about. But taking from what you were saying earlier, the relationship between the Sikh gurus and the Mughal emperors was very complex. From friendship to reconciliation to conflict. I think they kind of traversed the whole gamut of दोस्त भी थे उनके बीच में conflict भी रहा. तो what I would like to ask you is that what was the role of the Mughal Empire in the early history of Sikhism? I will come back to the Udasis. हम वापस आएंगे where Sarbpreet ji will tell us about the Udasis. But since he has brought in the Mughal emperors, ये वाला question पहले पूछ लेते हैं.
So I have to warn you, I'm trying to compress. I was telling Dr. Harshali ji earlier that I have a podcast on Sikh history, which is roughly 32 hours long, 32 episodes. We're trying to condense that into 40 minutes, so I'll try to do my best. So the Mughals didn't so much have an impact on the Sikh faith, but they definitely interacted significantly with the Sikh faith. The interaction begins very early in the 1520s when Guru Nanak Sahib is returning from his visit to Mecca. He goes to a small town called Sayyidpur, which falls in modern-day Pakistan. It's called Ahmedabad now. And there lives one of his most beloved disciples, a so-called low-caste carpenter by the name of Lalo. So Guru Nanak Sahib goes and stays at Bhai Lalo's house whenever he visited Sayyidpur. This time, however, before he gets to Bhai Lalo's house, he sees a terrible sight in the streets of Sayyidpur. There are corpses piled everywhere. There is blood running in the streets. Women are wailing. Muslim women, Hindu women, all wailing alike. Their men have been killed. They've been molested. Their young daughters and sisters have been taken captive. What has happened is Sayyidpur has been attacked by Babur. Babur is not the Mughal Emperor Babur yet. He's a warlord from Uzbekistan who has his eyes on Hindustan. Why? Because of the legendary riches of the land. which have attracted many, many invaders. So Guru Nanak Sahib, when he sees what Babur has done, is deeply, deeply anguished, and he's enraged. And from his core emerges this cry of rage, in which Babur is called a tyrant to his face. The words that Guru Nanak spoke at that moment have been captured in our scripture, the Guru Granth Sahib. Collectively, these shabads or hymns are known as Babar Bani. So the Bani, the writing or saying, that is addressed to Babur. In his Babar Bani, Guru Nanak Sahib minces no words, pours scorn on Babur for what he has done, and reiterates the injustice that he has perpetrated. For his trouble, he is dragged in chains before Babur. And Babur, quickly realizing that he's in the presence of a powerful holy man, immediately has him freed, and a long dialogue ensues, in the course of which Guru Nanak Sahib shows him the error of his ways. Babur releases all of his captives, asks for Guru Nanak Sahib's blessings, which are given to him on the condition that he and his descendants will always rule justly. So Guru Nanak Sahib tells him, as long as there is justice in your rule, your family shall rule. But if you become cruel and unjust, your dynasty will be destroyed. And from there on starts this interaction between the Mughal kings and the Sikh gurus. Some of these interactions were very friendly and convivial, others not so much. Humayun had a brief interaction with Guru Angad Sahib. Akbar interacted with Guru Amar Das Sahib, visited him in Goindwal, was very impressed, and pressed a land grant upon Guru Amar Das, which he accepted only after the emperor kept insisting that was the land on which Amritsar was built and the Sri Harmandir Sahib was eventually built. Other interactions were not so salutary. Akbar's son Jahangir was cut from very different cloth, and he had the fifth Sikh Guru, Guru Arjan, tortured and killed in Lahore. Subsequently, he had the sixth Guru, Guru Hargobind, imprisoned in Gwalior Fort, and then Guru Hargobind fought the first battles with his son Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan's youngest son Aurangzeb essentially had the ninth Sikh Guru, Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib, beheaded when Guru Tegh Bahadur approached him to intercede for religious freedom for the Kashmiri Brahmins, because the governor of Kashmir, Iftikhar Khan, was intent on converting them by the sword. So the Guru went to Delhi to confront Aurangzeb and was decapitated. And then finally, the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh, during his lifetime, fought several battles against Aurangzeb and his subject Rajas and Subedars, in the process of which his entire family was wiped out. So such was the interaction between the Sikh Gurus and the Mughals, and of course the interaction continued for the next 100 years, which is the subject of my newest book, in a time when Mughal power was completely destroyed and the Sikhs rose into power in Punjab. But, that's perhaps a conversation for another day.
But I do want to talk about Guru Har Gobind Ji, the sixth Guru, who in a very transformational manner dressed the two swords. And how many of you know about Miri Piri? Okay, so then we'd like you to tell us a little bit about Miri Piri, the aspect and the sort of effect it had on Sikhism and the people of the faith.
So, the final moments of the life of Guru Arjan Sahib, he is bathing in the river Ravi in Lahore. He has been tortured mercilessly for several days. He's been seated on a hot plate. He has had hot sand poured on his head. His body is in tatters, and it's clear that he's about to leave the world soon. During his final moments, he sends instructions to his young son, Hargobind, who is going to be the sixth Guru. And the instructions that he sends are roughly as follows. You will follow the path of the Gurus who preceded you, but in addition, you will raise an army. You will surround yourself with soldiers, and you will confront tyranny and injustice in a direct manner. When Guru Hargobind ascended to the Gurgati, or the Guru's throne, he put on two swords, the swords of Miri and Piri. The sword of Piri signified his spiritual power. The sword of Miri signified his worldly or temporal power. Western historians in particular see this as a big shift in the path of Sikhism. That is not true at all. That sword of Miri was nothing other than the cry of Guru Nanak Sahib when he saw the death and destruction in Sayyidpur. The principle was exactly the same. Injustice must be confronted. The sword of Miri never came out of its scabbard for conquest, for revenge, never. The only purpose of the sword of Miri was the protection of the weak. Whenever tyranny needed to be confronted, that sword would be unsheathed. Guru Hargobind then created what is known as the Akal Takht today. At that time, it was a platform where the Guru held court. And since the time of Guru Hargobind Sahib, the Akal Bunga, as it was called earlier, and now the Akal Takht, has been the seat of temporal power for the Sikh Panthar community.
From the sixth Guru, let's come to the 10th Guru. Now, this is a story my father-in-law told me that in 1699, Guru Gobind Singh Ji called his followers, the people who used to follow the Sikh religion, and everybody to come and collect in the town of Anandpur. And more than 80,000 people came there. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji came out with a naked sword and asked for a head. उन्होंने ये कॉल 5 बार करी, 6 बार करी, जब तक 5 लोग जो डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ इंडिया से थे, डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द कंट्री से थे, डिफरेंट क्लास से थे, स्टेटस से थे, वो लोग आगे नहीं आए. उन्होंने अपना सैक्रिफाइस वॉलंटियर नहीं करा. और एक बहुत ही बड़े पैमाने पे उन्होंने कहा कि I am going to start, and he initiated these 5 people and individuals into the Khalsa Panth, जिसको खालसा पंथ कहा जाता है. एंड एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग वे में वो उन 5 लोगों ने वापस गुरु गोविंद सिंह जी को इनिशिएट करा उसी पंथ में. So tell us, sir, about the dramatic and this historical gesture of the Khalsa Panth, and what were the events that led to the creation of this Panth?
So I'll offer you a very traditional Sikh view as opposed to what you might read in history books, particularly written by those trained in the Western tradition. The comments that were made, let me focus on one particular comment, that after the Guru initiated the 5 beloved ones who had sacrificed their heads for him, he knelt before them and said, "Now you initiate me." Strange, right? Why would a guru bow before his disciples? Well, even this came from Guru Nanak Sahib. Flashback a few hundred years before, during Guru Nanak Sahib's last few days on earth. On the banks of the river Ravi, all the important Sikhs have been summoned. And Guru Nanak Sahib takes the hand of his most humble disciple, Pailena, places him on the Gurgadi and bows before him. And everyone is shocked. What's happening? Which Guru bows before his disciple? That is the moment when the Sikh Guru ceases to be a human and turns into an institution. So Guru Nanak Sahib created this institution of Guruship. And in the Sikh faith, it is our absolute belief that the same divine light permeates all the 10 Gurus. They are animated by the same light, and there is no difference between them in terms of doctrine. So when Guru Gobind Singh knelt before the five and asked for their blessing and initiation, it was yet another echo of what had happened in the past with Guru Nanak Sahib, where the Guru was expressing his humility, because at the end of the day, the Guru was the leader, but the Guru also served. So it was a fundamental concept in the Sikh faith. In a certain sense, on the day of Vaisakhi in 1699, in this very colorful incident, what Guru Gobind Singh Ji did was, he put a stamp on what Guru Nanak Sahib had started. So Panth Guru Nanak Sahib ne shuru kiya tha, Guru Gobind Singh Ji ne us din us pe mohar laga di. That was the creation of the Khalsa.
And what was the impact of this key moment?
The impact of the key moment is difficult to overstate. And let me answer the question in a slightly roundabout manner. 1708, Guru Gobind Singh Ji leaves this world. All of a sudden, the Sikhs are left without a Guru for the first time in generations. Now reflect a moment on that caste pyramid that I drew for you earlier. At the top sit the high castes and so on. When a new faith is born that promises equality, where do you think the followers mostly came from? Did they come from the top of the pyramid? No, they came from the bottom of the pyramid. These were the people who had systematically been discriminated against for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. They got some measure of confidence in the times of the Gurus. Now, 1708, the Guru is gone. 82 years later, the young chief Ranjit Singh, Shukar Chakia, storms into Lahore, crowns himself the emperor, and then, over the next couple of decades, establishes one of the largest empires that the northern part of India has ever known, the first king in Lahore after Porus. Remember Porus, who you read about in your history books in the time of Alexander? Since the time of Porus, there had been no king in Punjab. So how did this miracle happen? These people from the bottom of the pyramid who have never touched a sword, who have been the lowest of the low in society, in the short time of 90 years, established this huge kingdom. How? That's the answer to your question. That's what the creation of the Khalsa did. And very quickly, the secret sauce or the magic was the bowing of the Guru before the disciples. When the Guru said to everyone, I give my power back to you. You are no less than anybody else. That was the spirit of republicanism that animated the Sikhs, which brought them great pain in the next 8 or 9 decades, but also brought them tremendous glory.
And transformation, and the way they viewed themselves, how they perceived themselves. कैसे वो अपने आप को देखते थे, वो एकदम बदल गया. पर क्योंकि हमारे पास टाइम कम है, we are short on time, let me come back now to Guru Nanak Dev Ji and to ask you what can the youth and the contemporary world take from his teachings today? We have so many young people sitting before us, and what would you like to tell them that they can actually pick out from, or actually just follow the general principles that I was told about, Naam Simran, Kirat Karan, and Van Chakna, about these. And the most important, and the one that has stayed with me throughout these 27 years of Seva, of giving back to humanity. So what, according to you, will the youth take away?
So look around you and see what's happening. There are many lessons from Guru Nanak Sahib's life that we can take to heart. The first one, for me, is compassion and tolerance. This is not just here. The world over, I feel, in the last decade or so, intolerance has really grown. Judgment has really grown. We tend to judge each other. We don't want to understand people who are different from us. We often hate people who are different from us. This is the absolute antithesis of Guru Nanak Sahib's philosophy, who believed that all mankind is the same. If we want to take one thing away with us from this conversation, I would say it should be this: stop judging. Look at everyone with compassion, especially people who are different from you, and you will find that at the end of the day, they are not that different from you. Guru Nanak Sahib never told Hindus to become Sikhs. He never told Muslims to become Sikhs. Guru Nanak Sahib told Hindus to be good Hindus. Guru Nanak Sahib told Muslims to be good Muslims. When he had a spiritual epiphany, the first thing that he said was, there is no Hindu, there is no Muslim. Of course there is. There are Sikhs, there are Christians, there are Jains. But we're all human. Let's not forget that. That, to me, is what Guru Nanak Sahib stands for, and that's what we should remember the most about him.
That's absolutely true, and we will. I hope the youth can take away this very important bite that you've given them, a very important lesson you've given them. And I'd like to share the last thing with you here. Recently I was talking at the Shanti Niketan Literature Festival. I was giving a talk on how Rabindranath Tagore was influenced and enchanted with Guru Nanak Dev Ji. And there was an incident that is written in his book. So Balraj Sahni, do you all know Balraj Sahni, the actor? So in his autobiography, he's written that he went to Rabindranath Tagore and Shanti Niketan and said that you've written the national anthem. Aapne national anthem to likha hai. Why don't you write the international anthem also for the whole world? So Rabindranath Tagore immediately turned around and said कि वो तो लिखा गया है 15th century में by Nanak Dev Ji when he wrote the आरती जो रागी जो हैं गुरुद्वारे में गाते हैं, that is the international anthem and the anthem for the whole universe. So I think उनकी ये बात कहना ही एक बहुत बड़ी मिसाल है कि गुरु नानक देव जी का कितना बड़ा influence हुआ है on the whole world, right? I know Sarbpreet ji has used a lot of poetry and a lot of other literary ways of in his book and otherwise. So we can't let him go without hearing something from you. So we would love to hear something, whether you'd like to read from your book or you'd like to sing something for us. Yes? Yes. So you have to be attentive now.
So just a little bit of context. During his travels, Guru Nanak Sahib visits the famous temple of Jagannath in Puri. When he gets there, the priests, looking at Guru Nanak Sahib's and Bhai Mardana's clothes, don't know which religion they're from, don't know which caste they're from, so they say you can't come inside. So Guru Nanak Sahib and Bhai Mardana sit outside. The priests have some difficulty conducting their rituals, so they get an intuition that maybe we've done something wrong. So they go and fetch Guru Nanak Sahib and Mardana, and they are invited into the Aarti. So the Aarti at Jagannath Temple is beautiful. There are these lovely thals with lamps on them, there are flowers, there are diyas, it's just beautiful. But Guru Nanak Sahib seems to be strangely unmoved by this fabulous spectacle. So that's when the priests, after the Aarti is done, go to him and say, "To itni mahan Aarti hui hai, itni sundar hai, लेकिन ऐसे लगा कि आपका ध्यान कहीं और था. So that's when Guru Nanak Sahib says these words that Dr. Harshali ji alluded to, that Rabindranath Tagore called the international anthem. I'm going to sing that for you. So Guru Nanak Sahib, the reason why he was not impressed by the arti of Jagannath in the temple, the reason which is this Shabad, because he could see a cosmic arti in progress, where the thal was the entire sky, the lamps were the stars, the incense was all vegetation in the universe. That was the arti that Guru Nanak Sahib's consciousness had affixed itself on. आरती कैसी आरती होए भव खंडना तेरी आरती भव खंडना तेरी आरती अनहता शब्द वाजंत मेरी आरती कैसी आरती होए गगन में थाल रव चंद दीपक बने तारका मंडल जनक मोती धूप मलयालो पवन चवरो करे सगल बन राय फूलंत ज्योति फूलंत ज्योति आरती कैसी आरती होए सहस तब नैनन एक पद गंध बिन सहस तब गंध चलत मोही सहस तब नैनन नैन है तोहे को सहस मूरत नना एक तो ही सहस पद विमल नन एक पद गंध बिन सहस तव गंध इव चलत मोही इव चलत मोही सब में जोत जोत है सोए तिसने चानन सब में चानन होए गुर साखी जोत प्रगट होए ज्योतिष भावे सो आरती होए सो आरती होए आरती कैसी आरती होए हर चरण कवल मकरंद लोभित मनो अंधनो मोहे आई प्यासा कृपा जल देना नक सारंग को होए जाते तेरे नाय वासा तेरे नाय वासा आरती कैसी आरती होए भव खंडना तेरी आरती अनहता शब्द वाजंत देवी आरती कैसी आरती ऐसी आरती होए भगवंदना तेरी आरती। No applause, please. No applause. In the Gurbani tradition, we don't applaud when a Shabad is sung. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarbpreet Singh. Thank you so much for that. And a very satisfying and an enchanting conversation. I'm going to open the floor for questions. Any questions for Sarbpreet ji? Thank you so much. It was wonderful. There is.
You were a great audience despite my scolding you.
Good evening, sir. Good evening. So it was really a very, very enlightening and enriching session over here. So you began with the meaning of the word Sikh, that is disciple. So I just wanted to know, when did this word originate? Because we came down to Khalsa. So which guru or how did it start?
Which word? The word Sikh or the word Khalsa?
The word Sikh, how did it get connected with this?
When I'm not sure of something, I usually refrain from speaking about it. So the etymology of the word I'm not intimately familiar with, but it appears in the Guru Granth Sahib. It's an ancient word, and learning constantly is one of the expected attributes of a Sikh.
So we are not very sure how it is.
I'm not very sure. I'm sure other scholars must be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. You've been a great audience. And just keep patient for another minute. Thank you, OCLF, Harshali Group, everybody here for having us here.
And thank you, Dr. Harshali, for doing such an outstanding job moderating. Big hand of applause, please.